So, welcome to this UK Reach webinar on late due notifications as well as what's ahead for the chemical industry next. And by what's ahead, I mainly mean the inquiry phase ahead of the registration. So today we have three presenters. Myself, I'm Fredrik Johansson. I'm a partner at Reachlaw, head of sales, have a long background in chemistry, chemistry and chemical regulations, obviously, and also environmental EHS regulations. I've been at Reachlaw for more than 11 years and have worked a lot with the UK REACH regulation as of late with my colleagues. So Steve, you want to present yourself in brief, please?
Yes, my name is Steve George. I have 33 years in industry, and for the last year I have been a director of Reachlaw UK and a senior advisor to Reachlaw in Finland.
Thank you, Steve. Pietro, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Pietro Di Tondo and I'm the regulatory manager of the newly opened UK REACH team, part of the Reachlaw family. I have a full regulatory experience starting from my university days, and I transitioned into regulatory straight afterwards, and happy to present to you today.
Thank you. Okay, so just some practical information regarding the webinar. So you will be able to send in questions using the chat function. So please do that. We'll try to answer these questions at the end of the webinar. And also we will answer questions that were sent in ahead of the webinar at the Q&A part. And for those questions and all questions for that matter, we will provide answers in a Q&A document to be shared after the webinar. And you will be shared also a link to this recording, so you can always come back and look at the slides, as we tend to go through quite a lot of material with a lot of text. So, and of course, please feel free to provide us with any feedback. We appreciate that a lot, and it of course helps us develop our webinars and ourselves. So thank you for that if you provide feedback. Okay, so the agenda today will be as follows. So we'll just have a brief introduction to Reachlaw, so who we are. I'll have that. Then Steve will talk about the current status of the UK REACH regulation, and then it'll switch back to myself. I will talk to you about late doings and who can benefit from these, as well as give you some tips and tricks. After that, we'll just give over the floor to Pietro, and he will talk to you about inquiries and give you some tips and tricks. And at the end, we will have our Q&A session to answer any questions as mentioned. So the duration is approximately 60 minutes, but for those of you who have participated in our webinars in the past, you know that they may be exceeded just a bit, so please be patient. Just our standard disclaimer and a copyright note. So obviously all the information that we are providing in these presentations is based on our let's say best knowledge of the subject, and of course you use it at your own responsibility and risk. So we will represent, of course, no warranties or accept any liabilities related to what we present here, because each case is of course always unique, so there may be different applications in your case. So if that is the case, of course, please feel free to contact Reachlaw. We'll be happy to help you in your particular specific case and provide specific advice. So that's enough for the legal disclaimers and jargon. So next, just to provide you with a quick overview of Reachlaw. So who we are for those of you who don't know us yet. So we provide support for REACH, so EU REACH and EU REACH-like chemical regulations globally. So this obviously encompasses also the UK REACH regulation, which is essentially a copy of the EU REACH regulation and will be the focus of today, obviously, but also the Turkey KKDIK regulation, which essentially is the Turkish REACH equivalent, also essentially a copy of the EU REACH regulation into Turkish law. Beyond that, we also support in the upcoming Eurasia REACH regulation, and also support our clients with K-REACH, so Korea REACH, albeit in this case through our partner in South Korea. India Reach is something that's behind the corner, so to speak, and something that we are also providing and will provide services for our clients. I have a slide on the timelines in a few slides down the road. And of course, EU Reach is still our core, one of the core businesses where everything started. So of course, that's something we also support our clients with. So we have a set of worldwide offices. So we are a global company as of today. Our headquarters is in Espoo, very close to Helsinki and close to the chemical agency here in Finland. Today, our focus will be on UK Reach, and my colleagues from the UK office located in Manchester will provide their input to this webinar. Then we have also an office in Moscow and in Turkey, obviously, and also in New Delhi in India. So in all of these locations, we provide only representative services for these particular regulation in these jurisdictions. In Brussels, we have a very small office with essentially just a half a person working there. So not much at the moment. So for UK Reach, we provide a full set of services from only representative services to all the technical and compliance process specific services such as late doing notification as of today, also the full set of registration services including inquiry and lead registration and a so-called deferred registration for new registrations of existing substances. We will not go into that in detail today. We've covered that in other webinars that we provided on UK Reach, so you're always welcome to look at those. But also all the more demanding work, as mentioned, lead registration, but also UK Reach authorization and all related consultancy, technical, legal, business related support. Also GB CLP is something that we obviously also provide services on. So we specialize in chemical regulatory compliance and sustainability topics. And for your information, for those of you who don't know yet, we actually also have a YouTube channel called Reach Law Talks, where we have posted quite a lot of our webinar materials. This webinar will also be posted there, and we are and have started providing more contents such as shorter clips on regulatory topics, and we'll do that in increasing pace as we go forward. So please follow us on YouTube, and if you like, give a thumbs up, so to speak. I just also want to mention that we have a LinkedIn profile, and we'll provide Tuesday's compliance picks, in LinkedIn, but we will provide more information on that through our follow-up email when we provide links to this webinar recording. So you can follow that link and that information for more information on our LinkedIn material. Okay, so just as a final slide before I give over the floor to Steve, just wanted to give you a quick overview of what's next when it comes to these specific chemical regulations that we are supporting directly, or then in the situation of the K-REACH regulation through our partner in South Korea. So in Turkey, obviously the pre-registration phase or the late pre-registration phase is still continuing, and a lot of the lead registration related activities have started. So a lot of the lead registrants are developing their lead dossiers, and soon companies will be able to join and purchase a letter of access and join these joint submissions. So really it is in a very high workload phase at the moment for the lead dossiers, and soon will be for the co-registration phase. Eurasia Reach is something that will enter into force in end of 2023, albeit the so-called second tier implementation regulations will enter actually into force later this year. Also, other fundamental GOST standards and so forth will also enter into force in the first and second quarter of next year. So there's a lot happening also for Eurasia Reach. For India Reach, the entry into force based on current information is still 2022, so next year, but due to the ongoing pandemic and other issues, it may be that it will be postponed a bit, but we'll keep a track on that. And for K-REACH, finally, there's a registration deadline for CMR substances at 1 ton or more, or all substances at over 1,000 tons by end of this year. So there's also quite a lot going on for K-REACH. So that was the 1 minute global regulatory update. Okay, so next I'll just hand over to Steve, and just to conserve a bit of bandwidth, we'll turn off my camera. So Steve, please just tell me when to change slides.
Thank you very much, Fedi. Next slide, please. So, what is REACH, UK REACH? Well, UK REACH is defined as essentially EU REACH as at the end of last year, plus a series of statutory instruments, each of which amends the previous status. So, because there is not a consolidated UK REACH text at this time, though one is promised at some point, to understand what does the law actually say, you have to start with EU REACH as at December, and then the subsequent statutory instruments which amend it step by step. So if you cannot find anything in the statutory instruments, for example, related to Article 33 of UK REACH, it's because it is the same as EU REACH and has not yet been amended. So that's how it sort of works. It is a bit of a difficult thing to do, to be very specific about what the law says without doing that work, unfortunately. It came into force on the 1st of January, well, actually about 11 o'clock the night before, but close enough. And we have to follow the obligations in the UK since then. Next slide, please. The basics of UK REACH is the same as EU REACH. That is, it is about registration, authorization, restriction chemicals. There are obligations related to compliance with uses as flowed down from authorizations or through extended safety data sheets, and the communication obligations for SVHCs to articles to recipients. Those are all the same. Of course, there are some transitional arrangements for substances not new to the UK market from EU REACH, and those are the registration timescales on this slide under deadline. That is 27th of October 2023, 2025 or 2027, depending on tonnage or hazard. Next slide, please. The functions of the European Chemicals Agency and the European Commission obviously cannot carry on in the UK. Therefore, ECHA, though those functions are taken over by the UK Health and Safety Executive, and the ECHA information system is replaced by the Comply with UK REACH IT system. So dossiers are submitted to the Health and Safety Executive through that system, using those links as provided. Next slide, please. What your role is in UK REACH depends on what you were doing before and what you are now doing. So if you were a manufacturer in Great Britain before Brexit, then you would remain a manufacturer of a chemical in Great Britain under UK REACH. If you were an importer in Great Britain sourcing from non-EU countries before, then you obviously remain an importer today under UK REACH. If you were a downstream user or distributor sourcing chemicals from EU, European Economic Area or Northern Ireland before, you become an importer. Now, importers have obligations under REACH, and that is the same in UK REACH. Now, imported substances greater than 1 ton a year must be covered by UK REACH registration, albeit if you are sourcing those chemicals prior to Brexit, then of course you will be covered by those transitional arrangements, which is where the downstream user importer notifications come in. Those are temporary arrangements to allow you time to do the full registration. Next slide, please. So in terms of deadlines, before placing on the market, if it's a new substance, it's a non-existing supply, then you cannot benefit from transitional timelines, in which case you have to register before placing on the market greater than 1 ton per annum. albeit new registration of existing substances arrangements, you may get some alleviation for the full dossier from the Health and Safety Executive, depending on who else is registering the substance and what their timelines are. By the 30th of April this year, anyone grandfathering existing EU registrations into the UK should have done their grandfathering notification. And then by the end of last month, downstream user importer notifications should have been made for new importers that have been sourcing from EU before and therefore benefit from transitional arrangements. And then the registration deadlines, as I've previously mentioned. Next slide, please. So the current status, there's very little data really available in terms of the detail of this, because a lot of the data is hidden within the submissions, and the Health and Safety Executive have a lot of data to go through. But something like 1 million downstream user importer notification submissions have been made. Made by over 5,000 different legal entities, and the number of substances covered probably in the tens of thousands. We don't know the exact figure. For comparison, the EU REACH, there's around 22,500 substances registered. Now, there may have been some, let's say, over notification going on because people are erring on the safe side, though that should not have been possible unless they were genuinely on the market before. For comparison, substances notified under the UK grandfathering process, around 4,000 substances. So 4,000 substances have existing notifications being transferred in, and then we'll see what happens with the supply chain effects from the European side as we go on. Next slide, please. So I'll pass back to Fedi.
Thank you, Steve. So let's look at late doings and who can benefit from these late doing notifications. So the downstream user import notification is defined in this UK REACH regulation article 127E, and it says that doings are applicable if you have importer obligations under UK REACH as a previous downstream user or distributor of substances that were EU REACH registered. So these were covered by Steve, as in one of his slides, or you were previously covered by an only representative in the EU or the European Economic Area. And of course, this applies to substances placed on the GB market at 1 ton or more per annum. So you can make use of this downstream user import notification to ensure continuity of supply. But there are some caveats to this, and it is that you have to demonstrate that you are eligible under this existing supply case, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. These doing submissions and substances under doing notifications are then eventually subject to full registration based on the timeline shown by Steve. So in 2023, 25, or 27, depending on the volume, annual volume, or the hazards of the substance. Maybe just to note here also that, of course, if you do notify, it does not mean that you have to eventually register. It just means that if you intend to use these substances, import these substances, for example, beyond the registration deadline for your particular substance, then of course you would need a registration. But if you don't register, you can of course always stop. So you really buy additional time with submitting these doings, or in this case, late doing if you have not done so already. So speaking of the existing supply definition, so UK REACH, these UK REACH transitional measures, including this late doing notification procedure, applies to EU REACH registered substances that were in active trade into the UK in 2019 or 2020, and this applies to any volumes. So it means that you have, as an importer into GB at the moment, you have had to have received this particular substance from outside of the UK, either in 2019 or 2020, to qualify as existing supply. So it means that GB importers and only representatives that qualify under this existing supply clause can late doing notify still substances. So the UK REACH only representative can only cover late doing GB importers, so meaning importers who have become downstream users because there's an only representative appointed in the supply chain that have fulfilled these existing supply rules, so to speak. It means that you as a downstream user or a former importer into Great Britain have had to have this particular substance supplied to you in 2019 or 2020 by anyone outside of the UK, essentially. If these conditions are not fulfilled, then you first need to inquire and register the substance before you can place it on the GB market at 1 ton or more per annum. So this is very, very important to understand. So essentially, this would be the case if there would have been no Brexit. So in practice, if this substance that may not qualify for existing supply in your case, but it has been registered for EU REACH by someone, then it is considered a so-called new registration of an existing substance, and you can perform the registration by, of course, first submitting an inquiry and then a so-called deferred registration, meaning that you are submitting part of the information now, and later on, when there are joint submissions available, you will join those joint submissions and update essentially the registration you submitted, and thus becoming a member of the joint submission. But I would like to just stress that these only substances under this existing supply can be late doing notified by either the Great British importer or the only representative covering these GB importers that fulfill these existing supply requirement. So it is very important to understand that if you, for example, have an only representative in the supply chain and you are a GB importer of a substance that you did not receive from anyone outside of the UK in 2019 or 2020, then you cannot be covered by the doing that is submitted by the only representative. And essentially, the only representative to cover your import would have to submit a registration before they can cover your particular case, your import, so to speak. So this is just important to understand. So the in end of October, after the actual registration, doing notification deadline, which was the 27th of October 2021, so just a month ago, in the regulation says that the doing deadline is 300 days after entry into force, which then corresponds with the 27th of October. However, in just the day after, the HSE came back and updated their guidance document on the HSE website and said that companies could still continue to submit doings, so essentially perform late doing notifications. And this is likely because the message, so to speak, hadn't gone through to everyone who should have done something from the doing perspective, as well as, of course, the COVID crisis probably also played a factor. So the HSE really demonstrated a very pragmatic approach and just recognized that, okay, you can still continue submitting these doing notifications for the time being. And the guidance that the HSE published on the website says that you still have to be, of course, eligible to submit these doings, but those GB-based importers and only representatives can submit this late doing, but they should do it as soon as possible. So the next slide just shows you the excerpt from the HSE website stating this fact. Also mentioning that if you haven't done your notification yet, please do so as soon as possible. And the reason is because at the moment we do not know how long this grace period, if you will, from the HSE will continue. So it may continue for a while or it may not. So that's why we recommend, if you haven't done so already, to just do notify as soon as possible. So if reading the law specifically, of course, the deadline was already on the 27th of October. So technically, maybe you could be considered as non-compliant at the moment, and thus it would be highly recommended to just go ahead and do notify as soon as possible. So again, as said, a very pragmatic approach from the HSE, considering all the situations and the message probably not going through to all GB-based importers who would have to notify. And maybe just to note on the GB-based importers, so these are typically in the past, when the UK still was a member of the EU and the EU regulation applied, then of course these were downstream users with a fairly low level of regulatory activities when it came to the REACH regulation. Now suddenly, as of the UK REACH entry into force, they have become importers, so essentially a high-tier regulatory impact company, and many of these companies seem not to still know that they have to do something, and somehow still consider that they are covered by an EU REACH regulation, the registration, sorry. Anyway, if you haven't do notify, do so as soon as possible. That being the underlying message here. So to submit late doing notification, it's fairly straightforward, and you do it using the Comply with UK REACH IT system. When you report information, you report information on substances, and if you are, for example, importing proprietary mixtures, then of course you may not know all the constituents, all the substances part of this mixture. That is okay for doing notification purposes, because you do not have to report information that is not available to you. We'll come back to this in the next slide to provide a bit more information on that. So also good to understand that if there is an only representative in the supply chain who submits a late due notification, for example, then the GB importers who now have become downstream users will be covered by this only representative, provided they are eligible for this to be covered by the due notification. So they were supplied with a particular substance in 2019 or 2020. So that's very important to understand. And probably reflecting the large number of due notifications is the fact that there is no HSE notification fee for submitting these due notifications. So you can submit as many as you like, and as far as the submission, it is free from the HSE. And very important, as mentioned already, to know is that if you submit due notifications, it's by no means mandatory to then go forward with an inquiry and the eventual registration. So to do and submit a downstream user import notification, so a doing, and you need to essentially go through two steps. First is to get a doing number through this Comply with UK REACH IT service, and you do that by logging in to this system and going to the relevant doing notification screen, and essentially, we will see this in a few slides, go through a few workflows and get a doing number, which is legal entity specific. So on the slide, you will see just an example of a doing number, which is of course completely fabricated, but this is the format. And this you only have to do this once. So that this doing number is, as mentioned, legal entity specific and covers all substances that you will report separately as part of step 2. So essentially, doing this step 1 already fulfills the Article 10A information requirement in this Article 127E we discussed a bit earlier. So as part of step 2, you need to submit then detailed information on the substances covered by the DOIN notification. And you do this only for the substances that you are able to identify and you know that are included in your, for example, mixture that you're importing. So you populate a so-called DOIN additional information spreadsheet. It's an Excel template that is available on the HSE website, and you provide it per substance, per row in the Excel file. You do not notify mixtures or polymers. You notify substances and you notify monomers as part of polymers. So you notify those substances that are subject to UK REACH registration. And you, as mentioned, do only provide information that is available to you. And if you provide information on a substance, you at least have to provide the substance name or CAS number or EC number. But of course, if you have all this information, then you need to provide all the information that is available to you. So it can be quite laborious to fill in all the information that is available, if all information is available to you. Once this has been populated, you need to send it to the HSE at the provided email address, and you also have to provide information on the legal entity name submitting and the DOIN number that we just generated earlier. So what this looks like in practice, I'll just run you through the hoops in really quickly, is that you log into this comply with UK REACH IT system. In the, I'll just put on my laser pointer here, so you go and select submit the downstream user import notification. After that, you come to the next page where you provide optionally information on how many substances you are importing. So to be covered under this DOIN notification, as said, this is optional, so you can leave this completely blank. Then you need to check the details before you eventually submit the information, and once that's done, you will actually be provided with the DOIN number. And as said, this is legal entity specific. And once you have done this, you are done with the first step of the DOIN notification. So if, for example, you are importing proprietary mixtures and you would not know, for example, any of the substances included in the mixture, then this would be the end of your DOIN notification, late DOIN notification process. You would be compliant with the DOIN requirement at this part already after you submitted and generated this DOIN number. However, if you know any, at least, for example, the CAS number, INX number of the substance, then you and the substance name, then you need to provide this information in the Excel template as mentioned. So you do this by downloading the Excel template and then populating it with the provided information. And the way it looks is as follows. It is a very broad or wide Excel file, but as said, you only have to provide information on what is available to you. And it is very small text here, but you can just see that if you have a lot of information available on the substance, then there's quite a lot of information to be populated. In the beginning, you have to provide the DOIN number that you generated. I will not go into the details. You are welcome to download this template from the HSE website to examine this and investigate further. So the mandatory information as part of a late DOIN or the DOINs back in the day before the deadline are as follows. So the red box provides information on at least what information has to be provided if available to you. Obviously, the DOIN number is available to you because you just created it in the comply with UK REACH IT system. Legal entity name obviously should be available to you, and then of course at least one of these. If available, then you have to report it. As said, if a substance name, CAS number or EC number is not available, as well as any of the other information that needs to be provided, if it is available to you, if that is not available, then you would not provide the Excel. But as in most cases you will have at least some information, then this will be the minimum set. And if you have additional information on, for example, the registration number, IUPAC name, CAS name, classification, labeling, compositional information on the substance, tonnage band, and so forth, then you need to provide it essentially. And maybe just to highlight as a final note as part of the doing section before going to the tips and tricks, it is good to understand that although the UK authorities have been fairly flexible when it comes to the doing deadlines, the registration deadlines will not be as flexible. So please consider those as hard deadlines for submitting registrations where you intend to register your substances. All right, just a few tips and tricks when it comes to late doings before heading over to the inquiry part. So the recommendation, as mentioned, is to late doing notify as soon as possible, because we do not know how long it will be possible to do this, submit late doing notifications as per the HSC website information. And only doing notify substances that you know of. So you do not have to provide information on substances you do not know of. There's nothing to report if you don't know this information. If your annual tonnages of a substance starts to get close to the 1 ton threshold, and this substance could be covered by downstream user import notification, meaning it's eligible for this process, I would recommend, and we recommend, that you would proceed with the late doing notification, just for the purpose of retaining flexibility in the supply of the substance in the event that you would increase or go over this 1 ton threshold per year. So maybe just to put it simply, if in doubt, late doing notify just in case. As said, it does not cost anything and does not obligate you to eventually register or inquire. So it is a cheap insurance in that sense. If you are a GB-based importer and you are not eligible to be covered under this late doing notification, you or your non-GB supplier through an only representative will first need to inquire and register, for example, through the deferred registration process before they can be covered. So this is very important to understand that, as mentioned earlier, if you have an OR in the supply chain and they are covering your particular substance, they are covering other GB-based importers who have become a downstream user under an OR, but in your case, you did not receive this substance from outside of the UK in 2019 and 2020, meaning you are not under this existing supply requirement, then you cannot benefit from the OR's doing. The only representative would have to register before to be able to cover you. And this, for example, REACH law as an OR, we are already, for example, for some clients submitting deferred registrations just for the purpose of being able to also cover new clients as an only representative in Great Britain, so that they can take benefit of this only representative coverage. And this, of course, has to be done before you are then receiving this particular substance at 1 ton or more annually. So please contact your only representative, or if you know of an only representative who you want to cover your particular case, and they will then discuss with you and see what is possible. But it will take a few weeks to a few months to actually complete the deferred registration, for example, including inquiry. So it's not immediate. So just be aware of that. Okay, that's enough for doing for now. So I'll just give the floor to Pietro, and he will talk to you about inquiry and why it's important and how to prepare the actual inquiry dossier. So Pietro, please.
Hello, everyone. Thanks. Thank you, Fadi, for the introduction. So yeah, as Fadi mentioned, my part of this presentation is to present why inquiry under UK REACH are important, and also how to prepare it, as well as giving you tips and tricks that we learn along the way while submitting inquiries. Next slide, please, Paddy. So yes, before a registration can be submitted, an inquiry must be submitted and accepted by the UK authorities, HSE. This will allow you for your substance to be placed in the correct substance group. Next slide, please. So the message is simple. Without an inquiry, you will not be able to UK REACH register the substance unless you grandfather your existing registration back in April, when the first deadline was on the 30th of April. Next slide, please, Fadi. So yeah, the inquiry overview is simple. So first of all, the inquiry submission is mandatory, and this is the first step for any registration. An inquiry must be concluded before the registration work can begin. The purpose of the inquiry is to verify the substance identity as a precursor of the registration process of the new substance. The inquiry dossier must include enough information to allow the correct identification of the substance. And this will allow then the HSE, the authority, to make sure that the substance is the same, and then can be replicated, the same testing, by any other company that wish to register the same substance. Only after the HSE has accepted the inquiry, the submission company can be placed in the substance group, which is similar to the CEF that was under EU REACH. Next slide, please, Paddy. So, as I just mentioned, there are similarities between EU REACH and UK REACH. One of those is the system use, the software use. This is the IUCLID 6. So the IUCLID is an international uniform chemical information database that allows dossier to be populated according to the different regulation framework. REACH and UK REACH are one of those. For the inquiry, there are different sections that need to be included for the inquiry dossier. The first section is section 1.1, which is the identification. Then we have section 1.2, which is the composition, and then the section 1.4, which is the analytical information. On top of those, obviously, you will have to have an appropriate dossier header when creating the dossier. Once the required information has been populated in the correct data set, the inquiry is created and exported for the submission to the HSE via the comply with the UK REACH system, which again is similar to the REACH IT system that we have under EU REACH. Next slide, please, Fadi. So in the next couple of slides, we captured a practical example of how a substance is submitted for the inquiry. For this particular example, we used ethinyl glycol, CAS number 107211, which is a common chemical. So as you can see, the prerequisite is that you have created the dossier via IUCLID 6, which is the current version of IUCLID, and it's ready to be uploaded into the system. So if you can see here on the first slide, there is a button or a link prompting you to the inquiry. In the next page, which is on the right, you will then, pressing continue, you will then be able to attach the file that contains the inquiry with all 4 sections that we discussed in the previous slide. Next slide, please, Paddy. So then you will be seen, evaluated by the HSE, by the database, that the substance inquiry is matched to the information that are available in the system. So in this case, as I said, we got ethinyl glycol, so it's been recognized, and then substance continuation can be submitted by pressing the next on the continue. And then on the right side, you will see the submission name that you will have to assign. So you can name it any time, but obviously it makes sense to give it a name that is recognizable. In this case, MEG is a common synonym of ethinyl glycol. So at this stage, then you will be given the name and then press continue. So next slide, please. So then you will decide what kind of representation you want to add. So if you want to add a third-party representation or not, so you will decide that based on your business prospect. So you will decide what's the best suit your ability. So at this stage, you will then go on the right side of the page that you can see to check all the details are correct. Once you are happy with the level of information with the inquiry dossier that's been populated, you will then upload it and you're happy again with everything that you input. You can then officially submit your inquiry. Next slide, please. At this stage, your dossier is successfully, your inquiry dossier is successfully completed and submitted under the name that you've given it to it. So you can give, in this case, MEG inquiry, as you can see, or you can say UK Reach MEG inquiry, any name that suits you. And you will get given a preliminary number that will allow you to reach back to the HSE to ask questions in case you observe a delay with the submission. After the inquiry is submitted and you got your number, preliminary number, it will be processed by the HSE. This obviously depends on what kind of workload the authorities have, but you will be communicating in the next few days if your substance has been added to the substance group or your inquiry has successfully passed. So it takes some couple of working days. In general, we observe from 5 to 10 working days, again, depending on the workload. Next slide, please. So at this stage, you will then receive an official email confirming that your inquiry has been successfully completed, and then you can take note of your inquiry number for your record, and then you will communicate this to whoever is suits you in your business, but also you keep in touch to the HSE via the messaging system within the platform, but also you are then successfully added to the substance group, which is similar to the CF, and then you can see who else has either grandfathered the substance or also inquired the same substance. So that will help for the following step of the registration. Next slide, please. Only once your inquiry has been accepted, you are then, as I mentioned, a member of the substance group, and then the registration dialogue can then begin within the comply with the UK Reach system. In the next slide, we have put a flow chart for the process. Next slide, please. So yeah, as you can see, a successful inquiry of a substance will be placed, the substance in a substance group, which obviously is a very important step, and including to all the other inquirers, company, and also other the company, the grandfather. There is no deadlines, but they must be completed before starting the registration work. So as I said at the beginning of my section, without any inquiries, you can perform a registration. So the next day, once you are in the substance group, you need then to select or elect a lead registrant and choose how to cooperate for the development of the joint registration dossier. So there is no deadline for this stage, but of course, the sooner the better. And also please keep in mind that either way, one lead registrant will be automatically assigned. So this will be assigned by the HSE if there is non-voluntary lead registrant. So then at that stage, one day is completed, the preparation of the joint registration dossier by the lead registrant and then to be shared for data purposes, and then the lead registrant had to submit the joint register, and then after that, all the other co-registrant can then submit the registration, depending on the tonnage bundle line. So we can, let's say, from the 2023, 2025, and 2027 to join the full joint submission. Next slide, please. So we just summarize in the next few slides, few inquiries, tips and tricks that we learned along the way while working with inquiries in the last couple of months. So let's have a look at our list. you, Fede. So first of all, it's critical for the inquiry is a good analytical information. Analytical reports need to prove that your substance is what your substance is and how to identify in the reporting of the inquiry. We have noticed this, for example, for organic substances, NMR is very important. The HSE has started to fail inquiry without an NMR spectra for all organic substances. Point 2, adequate description of the analytical method must be given. Anyone should be able to recreate the analysis based on this information. Point 3, analytical reports must also include the spectra, as I just mentioned, for organic NMR is important, not just the method of the result, and show that the analysis has really been done. So it will be checked and assessed by the HSE. The composition reporting in IUCLID section 1.2 must match the result of the analytical report that is also in section 1.4. The composition of section 1.2 again, you must give all the constituent, main components and impurity, both at the concentration range and a typical concentration. Next slide, please. The sum of the component and impurity must be adding up to 100%. If you don't know what the impurity is, just put unknown impurities or add the justification. That is very important. Remember that to report the reason of the inquiry in section REACH inquiry, and always check both the dataset and the inquiry with the Euclid validation systems. We noticed that this is a very important step, especially with the Euclid if you're using an online Euclid or you got the standalone system that you downloaded. So the validation tool has proven to be very, very useful in the last couple of months. You will then be notified by email of the progress of your inquiry by either directly via the Comply with the UK REACH platform or via email. So make sure that your contact email are correct. So this is very important. Keep the HSE updated and keep the system updated as much as you can. These are my section completed. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, Pietro. Okay, so now we can go ahead to the Q&A section, and as the line may be a bit bad, we will just opt to not put on the cameras just to retain a better bandwidth. So we've received a few questions ahead of the webinar and during the webinar. So let's try to see how long we can or how far we get with these answers to these questions. And as said, we will definitely provide all of the attendees with a Q&A document after this one, based on the questions received before and during the webinar. So if we start with a few questions that we received ahead of the webinar. So the question reads as follows. So any obligations for an overseas non-GB supplier to another non-GB supplier who then supply in-scope materials to UK? So the answer is obviously if you're outside of the GB, then of course there is no jurisdictions for UK REACH. So the answer is no, but of course you can, if you are an overseas non-GB supplier and if you are a manufacturer formulator, you can appoint an only representative in the UK for UK REACH purposes, who then can also cover these other non-GB suppliers supply to Great Britain of these substances. So this is called indirect supply. So technically, legally, you do not have to, of course, comply with the UK REACH regulation, but you can opt to have an only representative in the supply chain, so to speak, to take care of these regulatory compliance topics. And having this makes it simple for your customers in the UK to use your particular substances, because the only representative then takes care of these importer obligations on behalf of these UK-based importers of your substance. provided they.
Freddy, can I just add something to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Is someone has an obligation somewhere.
Yeah.
The importer has the obligation unless the importer is relieved by someone in the upstream supply chain outside the UK. So if you don't, then you're not taking the regulatory burden away from the importer in the UK. So someone's got to do it. That's the main point I wanted to get across.
Absolutely. So if you are then in the GB, then of course, at the end of the line, you will have to take care of UK REACH compliance. Someone always has to take care of it, so to speak. So well put. Thank you, Steve. Second question, how can REACH law help in letter of access negotiations in case a company either owns EU REACH dossier data, presumably, or has no EU REACH dossier, presumably no data? So I can take also this one. So definitely REACH law can absolutely help in the letter of access negotiation process. And specifically, for example, if you own data, for example, from EU REACH processes, from the registration process that you can use, for example, for UK REACH registration purposes, then of course you do not have to pay for that particular endpoint, that particular data when you are buying a letter of access for UK REACH purposes. So this is something that definitely we can help you, and we have done that already for EU REACH purposes. I will certainly do that for UK and Turkey purposes and other regulations as we go forward. And maybe just to highlight also that very important to understand that this data sharing implementation regulation has also been carried over to the UK legislative system. So all the same requirements to itemize costs as part of letter of access is there in the UK also. So if you are a data owner for EU REACH purposes that you use for UK REACH purposes, then definitely there is room for negotiation. In other cases, of course, we are also happy to negotiate and make sure that the lead registrant or consortium provides all the information they have to as part of the letter of access negotiation and registration process. Okay, next question. So is there any knowledge as to how actively inquiry dossiers are submitted and whether the process of this distribution and work with substance group of already grandfathered registrations works well? So this is a question, maybe I'll just hand it over to Pietro in this case. Pietro, if you want to take this one.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thank you, Freddy. So we met with the HSE delegates throughout a couple of conferences in the last couple of months, and they confirmed that obviously the inquiry dossier and the submission in the last couple of months has increased quite exponentially. The HSE delegate also confirmed they are putting all the measures in place to help to minimize this disruption for this. And obviously they are also expanding the team at the two different branches, which are the one in Merseyside and the one in Yorkshire. And they are helping everyone to achieve the compliance status. Obviously, as far as the substance group concerned, there's not been noted major disruption simply because at the moment everyone is focusing on the inquiry first, getting the substance group established first, and then the discussion will begin. We thinking it'll be more in the next year from the January 2022, because obviously it's the first company that had to submit by the 2023 deadline that will have to start discussion. But everything seems to be in place, and no disruption will notice, at least from the REACH Law UK team side. So we are happy and confident that everything is being put together. And also, as we notice, even with the late June deadline, the HSE are using a very pragmatic approach, and they are there to help. So if you got questions, they are happy to help with any question you might have. Thank you, Freddy.
Very good. Thank you, Pietro. The next question probably goes to yourself or Steve. So how does the HSE monitor GB-based imports of chemicals? Do they have inspections?
Yes.
Question.
Yes, thank you, Freddy. So yeah, the answer again is yes. the HSE have confirmed that inspection will be carried out at some point. As an inspection, that will be announced. But the main tips that we receive is to always keep a good audit trail and make sure that the substance tonnage is tracked correctly. So make sure you got all the data and file that you might be have to show to the authorities. So it's important to keep a good audit trail, and it's important to keep a good tonnage tracking system in place. Or this is a very, very good advice that we've given.
May I add to that?
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, Steve.
So yeah, if you are a non-UK company exporting to the UK but employing an only representative, clearly the HSE are not going to inspect you, but they could inspect the only representative, which is why the only representative must know who the customers and volumes are, because they would have to be able to demonstrate compliance.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, question number 5. So when the substance is gases, for example, ethylene, in order to submit an Article 26 inquiry, do we need to conduct analysis to get a spectrum chart? I'm just making the question a bit simpler. So yes, obviously the question is, and Pietro, you can add additional information if needed, but obviously if you are going to inquire, you will need the analytical information as part of the inquiry dossiers. You have to report this in section 1.4, as we've seen, saw in Pietro's part. Yeah. So if you don't have this information, you have to conduct tests to get this information on your substance. So for example, if you, for a registered EU REACH register, the same substance, you may have already this analytical information for EU REACH purposes, and you can definitely use the same information for UK REACH purposes. But if you don't have it, it has to be generated.
Yeah,
Pietro, we have something to add.
Yes, that is correct, Frederick. But also, if that for any reason, obviously the new testing cannot be conducted, and there is a reasonable explanation, justification, just get in touch with the HSE and they will guide you through how to put the justification within the system. They will provide you a full list of how to instruction.
Very good. Thank you, Pietro. Okay, so some questions, excuse me, questions submitting during the webinar. So the first question was, is there a possibility for late doing notification? So, or do we have to go for the inquiry route? So the answer was provided. So yes, it is possible still to late do notify. Please do so as soon as possible, provided you are eligible to do so as per the existing supply requirement. Then the next question, which kind of proof is required for showing that substances listed in the doing were on the UK market in 2019 and 2020? I can take this, or does someone of my colleagues want to answer this?
You may take it, Freddy.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So yes, so as part of the doing notification, you do not have to provide any proof of supply in 2019 or 2020. However, you have to have this information at hand in case of inspections. So what this information is, it can be, for example, invoices, some supply contracts, any proof that you, in fact, were receiving this particular substance in 2019 or 2020, essentially would work in your favor. So there's no particular list of requirements for what this kind of proof is, but we suspect this is the type of information that would prove your case. But as said, you do not have to provide it proactively, only in case of inspections or asked, of course, by the HSE, for example. Okay, then the question of until when will the late doing window be open? Is there a specific limit in time? I think we got a few of these questions. So Steve, do you want to take this one?
Yes, no problem at all. They're not going to change the law, and the law basically says 27th of October. So whilst they're being lenient, they're not going to give a specific answer to this question. It's essentially, if you have failed to provide a DUIN and you intend to continue to receive the substance, you are already non-compliant, but you should get a fair hearing. So if you have a concern, raise it with the HSE, but certainly do the DUIN as soon as you can. You know, they're not going to provide a late DUIN formal version in the legal text. It's not going to happen. The Parliament's got other things to do.
Thank you, Steve. I realize that we're a few minutes over the 3 o'clock in Finland, 1 o'clock in the UK, but we'll take a few more questions, and as we will reply to all of these questions in a Q&A document afterwards. So we'll take a good question. I think I've got a few of these. So the question is that, where did we have it? Sorry, I seem to lost it. Just a second. It was related to, yes. Is there an official list of substances notified, so do we notified or inquired for? And this was also another question related to this was, do you know if there will be a kind of ECHA online website listing registered substances and UK REACH, under UK REACH as well? So maybe if I take this and my colleagues in the UK can provide additional information. So at the moment for DUINs and inquiries, there is no list that you can check whether the substance has been DUIN notified in general or so forth. And the same applies for inquiry. Obviously, if you want to check if a substance has been inquired for by a particular company, the only way you can then get this information is by knowing maybe someone who has inquired for the same substance and asking them to provide information on who else is in the substance group, or then you yourself go ahead and inquire for the substance. But as far as a list that you can browse online, it is not available, and to my understanding, it will not be available. Please, colleagues, you can provide additional information if you know.
I will just add to that is I imagine that the reason for the question is that if I was a long way downstream and I wanted to be assured that the chemicals I use will remain on the market, then having a list of substances that have been DUIN notified or registered or inquired will not actually give me much comfort, because the obligation is on the specific importer of the substance or the mixture that you are using, not on the substance in general in any mixture. So I agree with Fedi. The best way to resolve that concern, if that's assuming that is the concern, is talk to your supply chain.
Absolutely. And then the second part of the question was that will there be a kind of ECHA dissemination portal available for UK-based or UK REACH registered substances? Do we have any information on this, Pietro or Steve?
I wouldn't be surprised. We haven't got any given information or deadlines, but we've seen how much the HSE have developed the system, and I wouldn't be surprised if we'll assist this. But this is only my opinion at this stage. It'll probably be in the next few months. If this obviously the HSE, the authority, have other things to worry about at the moment. For example, the implementation of an actual regulation that will be published. It's been told will be published in the new years, but I wouldn't be surprised. That's definitely something that they will work on, considering how much they develop the systems and their website so far. Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with that. I mean, the ECHA system, we're demonstrating what was registered and providing information for that, did develop, but it wasn't until 2010 that it started to develop. And if you were to look for the comparable timeline that under UK REACH for the deferred registrations, that will be 2023 rather than 2021. So, you know, at the moment, it's just about inquiries and figuring out who the substance registration groups are, rather than saying these things are registered. The only things that are registered today are grandfather substances, and they know that list. So it wouldn't be full information at this time. So I think we need to give them a little bit of latitude to develop that system in good time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. Then 2 more questions, and then we have to end it there. But we'll, as I said, come back with full answers to all of these questions as far as we can provide them afterwards. So a question on excuse me, inquiries. If you have submitted an inquiry, when can you place your product on the market? Usually this is after registration, but I saw deadline starting 2023 on your slides. So this depends on your case. And Pietro, you can provide additional information. So it depends on your case. If you are subject to, or you can benefit from the DUI notification process, then of course you can place your substance on the GB market up until the applicable registration deadline for you. You can in between, you can inquire, but that doesn't affect the registration deadline or your market access. Inquiry is just a precursor to the registration process. So, however, if you are not eligible for this DUI notification, then you would have to inquire first and then submit a registration. And only once the registration is accepted could you start placing the particular substance on the GB market at 1 ton or more annually. And then we had a question also. Let me see, where did I see that? Yeah, there was a question. If you qualify for and have submitted a DUI notification for a substance, there is no obligation to register. So that is comment. If you now submit an inquiry for the same substance, is there still no obligation to register? So the answer to this is yes, correct. So even though you inquire, it does not mean that you have to register. Albeit submitting an inquiry already requires quite a lot of work and is a fairly technical process. So I would say that there will not be that many companies just submitting an inquiry for the hell of it, so to speak, or just to check whether someone else has registered or inquired for the same substance. But
of course, if you don't register, then you cannot keep producing the substance above 1 ton a year. There is a consequence for not registering.
Exactly. But it is not required per se, but it has consequences, as Steve mentioned. All right, we'll just leave it there. And as said, we will provide you with a recording link so you can look at this presentation online at your leisure. And then, of course, we'll come back to you with the Q&A document. So I'd like to thank you and, of course, my team very much for your attention and your support. And please do let us know if you need any support with UK REACH or any of the other chemical regulations that REACH law supports. We'll be very happy to help and provide quotations on that, for example. So thank you very much, and I wish you a very nice day and keep safe.